Here we go, back again with another episode of the Around the Show Sports Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Kyle Showalter, and we're doing another solo episode tonight. We had a big trade happen in the NFL. We got the MLB All-Star Game coming up next Tuesday right over here in the backyard at Dodger Stadium. Might go to the Home Run Derby. We'll see how that goes, but let's talk right about and jump right into that big quarterback trade. That's obviously the Baker Mayfield deal that shipped him from Cleveland over to the Carolina Panthers. All it cost was a conditional 2024 fifth-round pick. Could turn into a fourth-round pick depending on how many snaps Baker Mayfield plays. And they're going to split the money 50-50. So right down the middle, Cleveland's going to pay half of that salary, and then Carolina's going to pay the other. And Baker's not a franchise quarterback. I think we're comfortable saying that at this point. But for a while, at least early on, it sort of felt like he was trending in that direction. And to see how quickly that has changed, and he's now out of Cleveland in a new spot, sort of similar to the situation surrounding Sam Darnold last year, who also ended up in Carolina. It's startling how quick things can change in the NFL, and I want to make a note of that before I kind of jump into what this trade means, how we got here, and all of that. The shelf life of players in the NFL is very short once they stop producing. Baker Mayfield was injured. The team around him was injured. There was drama surrounding his number one wide receiver who went on and won the Super Bowl with another team last year. So keep all of that in mind when you talk about Baker Mayfield and, consider what his legacy in Cleveland is, because I think it's going to be a muddy one for sure. But I want to ask that question. How did we get here? Baker Mayfield's a former number one overall pick. He's still on his rookie deal. He's already been shipped off for a 2024, not even a draft pick next year, the following year, a conditional fifth-round pick. How did he lose that value so fast? This guy won a playoff game in Cleveland. He's the first Cleveland quarterback to have any success in my lifetime. He set the rookie touchdown passes record his rookie season. That has obviously since been broken by Justin Herbert, but the point stands. This is a guy who had success early on in Cleveland, a place where quarterbacks' careers go to die, a place where coaches' careers go to die. Any NFL player will tell you Cleveland has been the pit of the NFL for quite a long time, and seeing a guy who finally brought that team success and finally got them into the playoffs, won a playoff game against a division rival, beat the Ben Roethlisberger-led Steelers in 2020, and now he's out. And obviously the situation in Cleveland and their quarterback room has changed very drastically over this offseason. This is obviously what led to Baker Mayfield being ousted. Obviously talking about that Deshaun Watson trade that brought him in this offseason. 3 first-round picks, highest deal in NFL history in terms of money, guaranteed money, all of that. So obviously Baker Mayfield doesn't have a spot on this team anymore with that. But I think that it was over even before that. I think that's why they were so eager to get Deshaun in the building, is because that they were ready to move on from Baker. And there's been some stuff talking about his off the field behavior inside of the locker room and stuff like that I'm not going to get into. I personally like Baker. I like the way that he plays. I like quarterbacks with a chip on their shoulder. Anybody who watches the show over the course of the time that it's been out knows that, he's the kind of guy that I would want leading me in a locker room, a guy with fire, a guy who doesn't act like a quarterback, a guy who acts like a football player. If I was me in the locker room, I would personally love that. But obviously, the NFL is a little bit different than the locker rooms that I've been in. So I'll go ahead and defer to those guys on that. But how did we get here? Baker Mayfield last year played on a shoulder injury that needed surgery after the season ended. He didn't complain once, at least to my recollection, about any coaching decisions, any coaching changes. He took everything on the chin and just went out there and battled. And to see Cleveland kind of give up on that guy after what they have been through for so long, and to see the fans turn on him so quickly as well, has been really startling for me. This is a guy who had, I think, 4 head coaches in his first 3 years in the NFL, or first 4 years, different play callers, different coordinators, a new offense every season. And up until he got hurt, he was a serviceable guy. He's not a Deshaun Watson-esque quarterback, a Justin Herbert-esque quarterback, one of those guys. Obviously, he's Deshaun Watson because he's the guy there now. But he's a guy who can go out there and win you football games, especially with an offense that has Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, these guys that can run the football down any team's throat. You don't need a guy who's going to throw the ball over the field. You need a guy that's played the way Baker played when he took him to the playoffs in 2020. and won a playoff game for them. Now he's obviously in Carolina. Now, what does that mean for them? Is Carolina a playoff team at this point? I don't think so. They do have a good young defense. They have great weapons. DJ Moore is, one of my favorite players in the NFL. He's a guy who's been on my fantasy team the last couple of years that I've enjoyed watching him play. But does Baker move the needle enough over Sam Darnold to take them from 5 wins to 10 wins? I don't think so. I don't think he's twice as good as Sam Darnold. But I guess, the case is going to be out on that. We'll see. There is apparently an open competition between those two guys. I would bet absolutely everything I own that Baker Mayfield starts week 1 against the Cleveland Browns when they come into Carolina. That's something to circle week 1 if you're interested in sitting down on Sunday and watching football week 1. I think that's a game a lot of people are going to have turned on. I will for sure. Now, what it means for the Browns. This is a franchise who's essentially punted on the one guy that's brought them success over the last 20-plus years. And I think that means something for the fans. Maybe they're not feeling it now, but I think when the dust on this settles and they look back, I think they're going to realize, Baker was a guy who really rode for the city. He wanted to be a Cleveland Brown up until all of this happened. And, they kicked him to the curb like he never mattered. And I think that, fans are going to look back, and fans are obviously very emotional. I'm a very emotional fan myself for my teams. So it's hard in the moment to put all of this in perspective. But I think, 3-4 months down the road when the season's going on, especially if Baker has success, there's going to be some Browns fans who are looking back at this and thinking, man, did we really want to do this? Do we really want to go out and get, this guy? Obviously, I've made my point known on what I'm talking about there in past shows. Do we really want to go get this guy and give up that guy who rode for our city, did all the commercials in our stadium, obviously wanted to be a Cleveland Brown, wanted to be here, of all places, wanted to be the guy who righted the ship in Cleveland, and really is the guy who did that. Before they brought Deshaun Watson in, Baker Mayfield's the one that they laid the foundation on with. That was when the conversations around the Browns started to change up a little bit, and people started to recognize, hey, they got a good staff out there, good coaching staff bringing in Kevin Stefanski. They got good weapons, a good offensive line. They can run the ball. Baker can do what he has to do in order to win games. They seemed like they had a good formula going, and people started to catch on that, hey, maybe this might be a good team going forward. I had them as, a Super Bowl sleeper team last year, and obviously the health of Baker Mayfield jeopardized that very early, and they never recovered. But it's always going to be a big what if for me, because I do believe Baker is a not upper tier quarterback, but I certainly believe Baker Mayfield's a starting quarterback in the NFL. If you were twisting my arm and asking me, hey, is Baker Mayfield going to be a starting quarterback in the NFL 3 years from now? I would say absolutely yes. I think he's plenty serviceable. Is he going to be a guy that's going to go win Super Bowls on the strength of his arm? Probably not. But is he a guy who can go out there and take a team to the playoffs if he has the right supporting cast around him? Yeah, absolutely. And there's not a lot of guys like that in the NFL. Otherwise, they wouldn't be paying average quarterbacks $35 million a year. And that's something that we've definitely been seeing. That was a conversation that was happening around Baker before he got hurt. You got guys like Carson Wentz making $32 million a year, Jared Goff right around that same ballpark. If you can throw a spiral, read a defense, and not throw 2 interceptions a game, you're serviceable in the NFL. That's how hard it is to play quarterback, and I certainly think Baker Mayfield's capable of doing that for the Carolina Panthers this year and for whoever going forward. He's going to be a free agent next offseason, and I'm definitely rooting for him. I would like to see Baker Mayfield take off and have a long NFL career. This is only going to add onto that chip on his shoulder, which he's made very obvious throughout the years that he plays with, and I love that. But circling back to what this means for the Browns, they don't have a quarterback this year. Are they going to go out and trade for a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo? Is Deshaun Watson's suspension potentially going to be shorter than a lot of us are thinking? I saw a full season was what the NFL was pushing for, and then it got shortened down to 8 weeks is what I was seeing, and now I'm seeing 4 to 6 circulating. Certainly have made my opinion on that very clear. I think a year suspension should be the starting point, and it should only go up from there. To see Deshaun Watson take the field this year would be a tragedy, in my opinion. But strictly speaking on the field, what is Cleveland going to do this year? Are they going to go out and trade for Jimmy Garoppolo, like I mentioned, and use him as kind of a bridge into Deshaun, maybe take them to the playoffs? He's shown he's capable of playing average quarterback in the NFL. Are they going to go out there and throw Jacoby Brissett to the Wolves and let him go play quarterback and just, hope for the best? I doubt it. This roster is too good for something like that to go and punt on a season. I don't know. I'm not a Browns fan. I want to make that very clear. I wouldn't even call myself a fan of Baker Mayfield per se. Wouldn't go buy his jersey or anything like that. I just flat out think the guy can play. I think he's good enough to play quarterback in the NFL. And this isn't a guy that you just go out and throw away just because you can. This isn't a guy that you go out and replace unless you have the perfect scenario bringing him in. And I don't think Deshaun Watson is that. This whole situation, I wish that it had got remedied differently, but I guess we're just going to have to see how it plays out. I'm really, really excited to watch that week 1 matchup there between the Browns and the Panthers for sure. So since the last time that we recorded, a lot has changed in college football, and that all began with USC and UCLA jumping ship from the Pac-12 to head over to the Big Ten and join their conference. Since then, a lot of other teams have jumped over. Clemson over to the SEC, Washington over to the Big 12, or Oregon as well. A lot of crazy shit's happened in college football, and I think it is losing sight of what makes college football special, and I'm going to go ahead and explain what I mean by that. When we turn on an NFL game, when I turn on an NFL game at least, what I look for is I want to see the best football players on the planet go up against each other. I want to see, the biggest, the baddest, the strongest go out and compete and see who is the best. When I watch college football, I'm not looking for that. I am looking for the atmosphere. I'm looking for the culture. I'm looking for the history. College football is way more than just football. It is Ohio State, Michigan. It is Alabama and Auburn. It is USC and Notre Dame. It's the rivalries. It's the spirit of the game. And it is what has made college football so special for so long. It's never been about the game. The game is the cherry on top of the whole thing. It is these cultures clashing against each other. It is going into Death Valley in Louisiana and seeing what that stadium does. It's going in to Ann Arbor, Michigan, when Ohio State's there and seeing how that stadium comes to life. It's completely different than anything that we see in the NFL. And this conference realignment that we're seeing, where we're seeing teams like USC, they're going to have to go play morning games in Pennsylvania against Penn State. And, it's losing sight of what makes college football special. It's the geology of it, the fact that everybody is regional. You have the ability to create these massive rivalries that mean something to these fans. Imagine if Auburn and Alabama, they split up and they went over to different conferences, and Auburn left the SEC and they said, we're going to go join the Big 12. We have no more Iron Bowl. And for some of these places, that's Christmas. That is Christmas, Thanksgiving, 4th of July, all of that wrapped into one. That is the biggest event of the year in that area. And that's just gone and taken away. And that's not just, the fans, that's the city. They live and breathe with these teams. And to take something like that means so much away from people or restrict the ability for those rivalries to be created, because that's regional. That is two people who come from different places in the same area going at each other through a medium of football. And I'm not saying that these guys hate each other, but if you're from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and you root for the Crimson Tide, you're looked at a little bit funny. It means a little bit more to the people that are around that area, and obviously it's bigger in the South being in the SEC and the culture that surrounds that conference. But that's true for everywhere, and the rivalry aspect of college football is what I think makes it so special. Rivalry week in college football is always my favorite week of college football. It's better than the playoffs. It's better than the national championship. It's better than bowl season, because you get to see these kids who are on campus and are inundated into this and become a part of these rivalries and all of that. You get to see them go out, and all of these people in the crowd get to live through them, and they get to live and die with what happens on the field. It's incredible, and it's one of the things that makes college football so special in my eyes. It's not professional football, even though I am all for players getting paid, NIL, even pay for play. I'm an advocate for all of that. But it's not professional sports. If it was, they'd be playing in the NFL or they'd have some kind of minor leagues. It is college football. And at college football's core, what it's been for so long is kind of an extension of the town that the city or the school is in. And the kids went out there and played, and everybody went out and just rooted for the city that they lived in. And it was amazing. And it's just a shame that, the money in this is starting to change the very fabric of the sport that we've all come to love. And it's a reality, and I understand, the more money comes into the sport, and NIL made this inevitability. where we really are heading towards, 2 or 3 true super conferences, and we'll see how the Pac-12 and the ACC recover, losing a lot of their big guns. Where's a school like Boise State going to go? Where's a school like maybe North Dakota State moves up to Division I and moves into one of these big conferences? Who knows? Just spitballing off the top there with that. But college football has undergone a massive change this offseason, and it's truly never going to be the same again. Once 2024 hits and USC and UCLA and Oregon and Washington and Clemson and all of these other schools move on from the conferences they're in, the sport's going to be changed forever. And I honestly don't know if it's going to be recognizable, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's going to be better for the kids. And at the end of the day, they should all act in their best behavior, and these schools should be acting in their best interest of those kids as well. And I'm all for that for sure. But who knows? When more money gets into stuff, generally it doesn't make it better. It makes it shadier. It makes it sketchier. So we'll see how college football trends, but moment of silence for college football as we know it, because it's dead. Now, I want to wrap the show up today by talking about a team that has gotten a lot of run on this podcast and is going to continue to get a lot of run on this podcast because I, for some reason, subject myself to watching them play over 100 times a year, and that's the Los Angeles Angels, who I am a diehard fan of. And it's a damn shame that I have to say that, because rooting for this team is getting harder and harder and harder every single year. And I think this year is potentially the most painful year as an Angels fan that I've ever gone through. As hot as they started, 10 games over 500 at one point, then they immediately go on a 14-game losing streak, something that I've never seen before as a fan. They've currently lost 9 of their last 10 as well. Mike Trout left last night's game with upper back spasms. Hopefully he's back soon. They're projecting he might be back as early as this weekend. But I've heard a lot of conversations going on about a certain MVP frontrunner named Shohei Ohtani, who's coming off an MVP season last year, potentially the greatest baseball season we've ever seen last season, and doing the same damn thing this year, and the team still can't win. And I've heard a lot of conversations talking about, the Angels got to trade Shohei Ohtani. A little bit less conversations, but I've still heard some whispers. The Angels should trade Mike Trout. And it's getting harder and harder as an Angels fan to deny those things that, maybe what if they do trade him? What does that look like? This, that, and the other. And obviously, thinking about Shohei with that, it's a lot easier to stomach. He's going into free agency after next season. Mike Trout's under contract for the next 10 or 9 years, whatever it is, making boatloads of money, good for Trout. And obviously, as a fan, as somebody who goes to Angel Stadium and watches the games and turns the game on at home all the time, you don't want to see those guys off your team. You want to see those guys have success in an Angels uniform. But what are they going to do? Because they have 2 options essentially right now. 3 options, really. They can, first option, which isn't really one, they can sit and do nothing and let Shohei Ohtani walk. They're not going to do that. So option 1 is to trade Shohei Ohtani, not at this trade deadline. Obviously not. Anybody that suggests that is insane. They're not trading him this year, but in the offseason, potentially, and at next year's All-Star break, or next year's trade deadline, is when they might explore that. Trade him, get an absolute haul, see what you can get for him, and then move on and try to rebuild the team around Trout, who's going to be 32 in the middle of next season. Or you spend big next offseason and try to get a bunch of guys in surrounding Shohei Ohtani, maybe spend on another big-name starting pitcher, another big-name position player. That luxury cap is only going up, the luxury tax cap, But herein lies the problem with that solution. If you go out and you pay a big-name starting pitcher $35 million, and then you go out and pay a big-name position player $30 million, I ask you, where is the money for Shohei Ohtani at that point? Because Shohei Ohtani is going to get the biggest contract in MLB history next offseason. You can put that on the board and run it to the bank. There is no way that somebody isn't giving Shohei $45 a year over 10 years or something asinine like that. He's too valuable. I think he's proven himself to be the best player in baseball at this point, outside of maybe Mike Trout, depending on how you define that whole conversation. Someone's going to give him that money. And it's not going to be able to be the Angels if you're paying, starting pitcher number 1, $35 million, Rendon, $36 million. Mike Trout, $36 million. Then another guy that you bring in, 30-something million. There just isn't enough money to put those guys and Shohei Ohtani on the field and put anyone around them of any kind of value. It just isn't mathematically possible. So the question is, what's the solution? And the answer is very simple. There isn't one. The Angels, as they are currently constructed, cannot build a team around Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout because they have neglected player development and the minor league system for a decade. It started with Jerry Dipoto trading away the entire farm system before the last GM, Billy Apple, even got in the building. He did a good job getting a couple of good guys in the system, guys like Joe Adell, guys like Michael Stefanik, guys like Brandon Marsh, just some guys who look like they could at least be major league players. But there isn't enough MLB level talent in the system. They got a couple guys that might pop and be really good. They got a couple guys who might be major leaguers. But if you go and you look at, a farm system like even an average system, just pick one, go on to MLB.com pipelines ratings and pick a system in the mid-levels and compare it to the Angels. The Angels probably have 5 guys in their system right now that'll be major leaguers at some point. It is remarkable the job that they have done, the botched job that they have done with their minor league system. And it goes back a decade. This is not the fault of the last GM, Billy Epler. This is not the fault of current Angels GM, Perry Manassian. They have done their best to patch up a sinking ship. And at some point, Ohtani's going to jump off. At some point, Mike Trout's most likely going to want to jump off as well. He's got a no-trade clause. He's going to be able to pick where he wants to go if that ever does come to fruition. But I think Angels fans need a reality check, myself included. I drank the Kool-Aid at the beginning of this year, and this isn't, being some kind of doomer fan and saying, oh, we're never going to be good. It's looking at the writing on the wall and realizing the Angels don't have any ammunition coming from the minor leagues. They have a ton of expensive players in the major league roster. They can't afford to put anyone on the field around their guy who's going to command a ton of money. The writing's on the wall. As Angels fans, I think it's time to accept it, myself included, and, understand. Trading Ohtani might be the decision that hurts, but it might be the decision that saves the franchise from being inept going forward. Only time is going to tell on that. We'll see what the decision is made by owner Artie Moreno, who is complicit in a lot of this, and current Angels GM Perry Manassian and what they choose to do. And on that note, we're going to end the show for this week. I've been fighting through some technical difficulties in here by myself, so hopefully this episode goes off without a hitch and we're able to get it uploaded online. Hear me all good, see me all good. But thank you for tuning in. If you haven't already, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button down below. It truly does help out a ton in getting the content out there. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I will see you guys next week. Peace.